As a ghost hunter, what was the most frightening thing you recall from your adventures? I was sitting pretty far away from him, and yet, in spite of that, I watched his expression clearly change. A sight we'll never forget. The ghost hunter forced out a mild laugh. Hello everybody, I'm the Rubber. Today, we bring you a famous ghost hunter. Tell me what his scariest moment was. During my college years, a popular ghost hunter was invited to our campus as a guest speaker by the Student Activity Council. The paranormal is something I've always been fascinated with, so eagerly made my way towards the auditorium. Although I was unfamiliar with this ghost hunter, but his background impressed me, as did the plans he had on the horizon. The event was back in 2005. This man was small in stature, he had a receding hairline and a white beard. I was fascinated with his view of the afterlife. We were exposed to video footage of the investigations he went on. The ghost hunter's riveting photo collection was just as interesting as the stories he shared with us. The presentation ended with a Q&A session. I certainly didn't want to let such an opportunity slip through my fingers, so my hand might have gone up faster than anyone else. The ghost hunter spotted me, pointed and smiled at me, waiting for me to speak. Nervous as I was, I found the courage to ask my question. As a ghost hunter, what was the most frightening thing you recall from your adventures? I was sitting pretty far away from him, a significant distance from where the ghost hunter stood, and yet, in spite of that, I watched his expression clearly change, a sight we'll never forget. The ghost hunter let out a mild laugh, but it was clearly forced. He then started to talk about an elementary school he explored that had been abandoned. The hunter was looking for a poltergeist. Suddenly, his flashlight began to lose power. I recall being quite confused, as I didn't really find his story very scary, and I couldn't understand why someone whose career involved hunting ghosts would find such a mundane instance so frightening. The ghost hunter hastily moved on to another question from a different student. When the presentation was over, the students made their way out of the auditorium, not wanting to get caught in a crowd. I discreetly slipped out from another exit. It was there that I saw the hunter having a cigarette while sitting on a wooden bench. I had hoped he wouldn't see me as I walked by him, but no such luck. The ghost hunter shouted my way. I looked over at him as he patted an empty seat to his right. He invited me to the bench. After a moment's hesitation, I proceeded to walk over to the bench and sit beside him. I wasn't being completely honest with you, the hunter said to me. What I said was not actually the most frightening moment I have been through. Yeah, I replied. That's what I figured. The ghost hunter proceeded to tell me the truth. When I was a much younger man in the 1970s, something happened to me that I will never forget. I was still fairly inexperienced as far as paranormal activity went. I essentially took the jobs that others with more experience rejected. The people I worked for usually had broken minds or were schizophrenic. They thought that either kids were playing pranks on them or phantoms were chasing them. My work generally involved a routine cleansing before moving on to my next gig. I was quite ecstatic when I got one particular call though. The client I spoke to claimed that a demon was haunting his house. He went on about possessions and physical manifestations. He even claimed that multiple witnesses could back his story up. I felt that this job was one that would help me establish a name for myself. It was, in my mind, the proverbial breakthrough I was looking for. The only thing that concerned me was the teenage son that lived in the home. The individual I spoke to said that his son was possessed, violently attacking members of the family. The son attacked his older female cousin. Naturally, before I visited the home, I wanted to make sure I was completely prepared. Some of the things I brought with me included holy water, crucifixes, sage, and even a small loaded handgun. Sadly, when I got there, no paranormal activity was apparent. For the next 2 weeks, I investigated the home thoroughly. The equipment I used was cutting edge for the era. I spoke to the son, the one who was apparently possessed. From my perspective, he may have been psychologically disturbed, maybe even depressed. Possessed by a demon though? Not from my perspective. I told the family that a child psychologist would be better suited to help their son. On the final day of my stay in their house, the family took the boy to a psychologist I recommended. His parents came back before midnight, retiring to their room for the night. I spent some time by myself in their kitchen reviewing my findings. All that they described to me could have been dismissed as family hysterics. Perhaps they were in denial about their son's need for mental health treatment. Nothing felt out of the ordinary, except for the drains in the basement. That house was built in the early 1900s, and its immaculate condition was kept pristine. The character and woodwork of the home was meticulously preserved. The only updates it received were the ones that were necessary, such as electricity and modern plumbing. The only one area in the house that wasn't maintained was the basement. The clammy stone walls were gathering moisture, making it a breeding ground for mold and spiders. That's why it didn't surprise me to see this windowless room left alone by the family. Sure, it felt spooky, mostly because of the single light that hung from the ceiling and its broad cement floors. But there was nothing worth reporting about the room itself. The only thing I couldn't figure out, though, was why there were 4 large, slotted drains in the basement. The home wasn't a mansion, so 4 large drains seems unnecessary to me. As I sat by myself pondering this, when suddenly I heard a faint sound, a thump. I didn't give the sound a second thought until I heard it once more, this time louder. A staircase led to the floor above me, which winded up out of the kitchen's corner. That's where this noise was coming from. I didn't think too much of the sound at first. I just assumed it's from someone in the family. But when I looked up, I saw it. It was coming down the stairs. It wasn't walking or floating. It was just moving down the stairs straight at me. Whatever I was looking at didn't have any eyes. It was faceless. And yet I knew that it was staring directly at me. That's when I heard it speak. I couldn't tell how it was able to speak. It didn't even have a mouth. Maybe it had telepathy of some sort. I'll never forget the words it said to me.
"You know what he did to us."
I immediately bolted from the house, leaving the family alone with whatever that thing was. I jumped in my car and drove. I just kept on driving and did not stop for at least 30 miles. At that point, I realized the distance I had driven. I pulled the car over and gave the family a call from a nearby payphone. The family moved away afterward. I wasn't able to continue the investigation. My report stated insufficient evidence as the reason. Years had passed. I decided to conduct some research based on my experience. What that thing said to me was burned in my memory.
"You know what he did to us."
And later on, I would indeed find out what that meant. I researched old newspapers and managed to piece the story together. Long ago, a well-respected mortician had lived in the house. The mortician could not locate a place in the town to perform his work in. As such, he built his own home and office space. The bedroom was in the upper level, his funeral home was the mid-level, the basement, as you can guess, was the mortuary. That's when I figured out why there were 4 drains in the basement. Decades had passed when suddenly someone well-respected in the community was brought to jail. He was suspected of abusing the professional position he had with a moral cause. I couldn't find any more information about the incident, likely because of the crime's sensitive nature. I did read that the punishment this man received was essentially a slap on the wrist. After spending a brief amount of time in jail, the home was stripped of all value by that perpetrator and left town well before his trial began. No one ever heard from him again. I began to put the pieces together. This man must have been the mortician. The words said to me by whatever that thing was remained embedded in my memory.
"You know what he did to us."
The mortician had a burning desire to create a home that accommodated his business. The things he did to those human bodies in his basement were things I would rather not discuss. But at least now, I knew what he had done to them. I will never forget his expression. The ghost hunter said to me with fear in his tone. There is no color in the ghost, his face as he went on. His beard was all white, but barely distinguishable from his pale skin. I apologized for asking. He dismissed me and left. I feel terrible for making the ghost hunter relive that traumatizing moment. As time goes by, that ghost hunter eventually faded from my memory. That is, until earlier last week. I was moving into a new house with my new fiancé. After taking some boxes and storing them in the basement, I noticed a slotted drain directly in the middle of it. That's when I began to worry. And thanks to the ghost hunter, I may know why. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Have you ever heard or encountered any paranormal event? Let us know in the comment below. We will draw your story and share it with the world. Don't forget to click like, subscribe to this channel, and hit the bell. Please share it to your friends if you like this video. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.